Even the most religious amongst us begin to question our deeply held beliefs close to the end of life, because beliefs are beliefs, right? They're ideas without any real evidence for them. And when we are dying, knowing that we're going to find out what happens after we die, when we die, I can understand why you might want to be like, ooh, is this right?
Yeah, right.
Or maybe I should have gone to church more.
Right.
Or maybe I should have gone to church less.
Right.
Or repenting. I've seen people get baptized at the 11th hour. I've seen people throw away a lifetime of Catholicism because they're close to the end and come up with their own ideas.
Wow.
I've seen people shift their beliefs based on what they've seen in the dream state as they approach death and dying.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Travis Makes Friends podcast. Today, I am making friends with Alua Arthur. Alua, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, Travis.
Oh man, I get a ton of pitches from publicists and agencies all the time for bringing guests on the show, and it is rare for most of my guests are me doing the reach out and having a list of people and purposefully reaching out because I want to have a conversation about something. But every once in a while, I get a pitch where I'm like, that is crazy interesting. And that was the pitch that I got when I think it was Lori or someone over from RNC was like, hey, you want to have a conversation with Alua? And I was like, yes, I do. Yes, cool. I do. And we've been trying to schedule it for months, and then it finally was able to work out. So I appreciate you taking the time.
I'm happy to be with you today.
And in the meantime, your book has become a New York Times bestseller.
It has.
So congrats.
Thank you very much.
You said you didn't get into it for that reason, but
no.
Why did you?
Well, there were stories that need to come out.
Yeah.
And I always say I'm not a writer, but then every time I say, well, stories really need to be written, they're like, that's kind of what makes a writer.
Yeah.
Right? I noticed.
Well, the book was very well written too.
It
was not just like you could have easily phoned it in and just been like, here's 10 lessons I've learned from being a death doula over the last whatever. Like it could have just been very, and still extremely helpful. Not to say that it wouldn't have been helpful. But like going through the book, it's like, man, you really took the time to share these stories in a very thoughtful way. And like I said at the beginning, kind of, you're trying to not give details, but also give details, you know what I mean? But I thought it was very well written in addition to like the lessons that you learned from it. So I think there's no accident as to why it became a New York Times bestseller.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people probably expected a how-to guide or these are the steps that you take to prepare for death. And that could have been written, but it could have been written by a lot of different people in the death care trade. You know, for me, it was so much more important to share stories because I feel both we learn best through story. And next, there's so much power in the individual story.
Yeah.
There's so many people out here who are trying to figure out how their lives matter, where they make meaning. But our lives matter just because they are. Each one of us has a unique, special story to tell that can serve as medicine for other people. And so I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to use my life also as a story so that people could have an opportunity to learn or at least be entertained by the silly things that I do, but hopefully also to learn something.
Yeah. Well, so if you're watching and listening right now, before we jump into the rest of the conversation, please go pick up a copy of Alua's book, Briefly, Perfectly Human. You can find it anywhere that you find books. I was doing the audio, which I like doing a lot more these days, whenever it's read by the author.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you again for going that extra step and reading the book yourself, or else I would have just picked up the physical copy instead. So
it was grueling.
I was going to ask you how the experience was.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So hard. And I've taken a bar exam. Okay. It was difficult. Just the being with some of my most difficult moments in my life and speaking them out loud was significant. Yeah. But also just the amount of focus it takes to sit and read aloud for 5 straight days, 9 hours a day. And then also as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, I should have picked a different adverb.
You're nitpicking your own book.
Man, wrong adjective.
It's like, can I change it in the audio version?
They were like, no, in fact, you have to stick to everything. It was hard. But I can't imagine somebody else reading my life out loud.
Totally. It's so strange that just saying the words out loud can sometimes be more difficult than even just writing them down.
So hard.
Especially when it comes to some of these really difficult things that you're putting into the book. The loss of your brother-in-law was one of those stories where it's like, man, you can just feel the emotion on the pages. So I assume there had to be some times where you're just like, can we pause? Because I got to cry real quick. You know what I mean?
There was a lot of crying.
Yeah.
There was a lot of crying. But mostly what I found kind of funny in retrospect is that I would finally choke through the most painful sentences and have held back all the tears. And then the producer would be like, oh, great job. But you said the instead of a. So we're going to have to do that again. You're like, no.
Great job. But
However,
yeah.
you made it, but it's not going to work.
Oh, man, I love that. Okay, so I want to go back in time before we kind of dive into the contents of the book because, and really, frankly, I mean, it's more of it's a memoir anyway, so you tell a lot of the back in time stories as well. But very interesting childhood as well. You were born overseas, and then your dad was in the government in Ghana, and then there was a coup, correct? And then basically he was thrown in prison, didn't know if you'd ever be reunited again. He gets out, you finally come over to the States. What of all of that experience do you have memory of? And what can you share about that experience?
My very first memories in life overall is when we were fleeing, when the soldiers were coming to our house to snatch up my dad and any other of the members of parliament, because we lived in housing for governmental officials.
Okay.
And so the first memories I can glean were people moving about really, really fast and like shoving stuff into car doors. And, there was a sense of urgency to what everybody was doing.
Because you were 3, 4?
3.
Yeah.
3 years old. And my dad is holding my hand, and I remember him picking me up. I remember having a different vantage point, bouncing around kind of in his arms, looking out of the window and seeing all the chaos down below.
Yeah.
Only in retrospect, and I now understand that that was the coup. And also that there was such a heavy chaos and emotional panic during the time. But I was cool and calm. I mean, I was 3. I didn't have much context for what was happening.
Sure.
But I also was so safe in the hands of my dad, who has remained a safe place for me my entire life. I'm very, very lucky for that. So that was one of the biggies. I remember flying to the States. I remember walking up and down the aisles and chit-chatting with everybody and my mom, just trying to make sure that I was fine where I was because she had 2 other kids to tend to. Plus she was pregnant with my youngest sister. I remember arriving in Maryland, riding an escalator for the first time and being terrified, but it was so thrilling to like jump on it and to snatch my sister's hand and force her on with me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
my kids are going through that stage right now.
It's so
my
scary.
daughter's 3.
Okay.
And my son's 5.
Yeah.
So yeah, the whole like, okay, here we go.
Here
1,
we go.
2, 3. You just jump at the end. Yeah.
Made it. We're safe. But there really is not that much to fear,
No.
Yeah, but it's like most things, trying it out for the first time.
Yeah,
and I
sure.
often say this about death. It's like, of course, it's a little terrifying as we're going into it.
Yeah.
We've never done it before, at least in these bodies that we remember. So it's natural that you might be a little scared.
Yeah. And your dad was back in Ghana this whole time, correct?
Yeah.
Or he was trying to flee and go to a different country. So I know you kind of interviewed your parents when you were kind of writing that from their perspective in the book, which was really cool. Was there anything that you were surprised to learn after interviewing them?
Yeah, I learned a lot of details that I didn't know. I learned that my mom really suffered some really unspeakable things. She had gone back to the housing after she thought that the soldiers were gone to go grab breakfast porridge for my little sister, the only thing that she would eat. And the soldiers were there and they enacted horrible violence on all the people that were still there. That was heartbreaking. I learned how my dad had to maneuver the system to eventually get out of Ghana and to travel through West Africa. He had no passport. He had no identification. He had nothing, but he was able to find a way. I learned also about incredible serendipity that occurred for him to finally be able to flee and then to meet us in the States. But I think overall what I took away was how committed my parents were to us and our safety. And by us, I mean my sisters and I. To our safety and to our futures, that they were willing to go to incredible lengths in order to make sure that we were going to be taken care of, we were going to be okay, and moreover, that we'd be set up moving forward. They're incredible people. I'm lucky.
So you call it serendipity.
Yeah.
Your father, from what I understand, would have called it faith.
Probably.
And there's a conversion story in there somewhere, right? So
Big.
Do you remember what, or no, I don't remember much before that. So were they religious before any of that happened?
No.
It was the experience that formed them both that way, and both separately.
Yeah, separately. But at the same time, my dad found Jesus while he was in prison. There was a Gideon's Bible in one of the nightstands or something put there by the Gideon's Foundation, I believe. And he read it and his conversion was complete. He decided that if he was ever going to leave prison, he'd spend his life in dedication to the church, which he has. And my mom separately started attending these overnight rallies and
And that was in the States?
That was in Ghana also,
in
while
Ghana,
my dad
okay.
was in prison.
Okay.
So she started attending these. There were prayer groups. You know, she really needed to cling to something.
Just for certainty and something.
Something. And I can understand it deeply. And I
Sure.
think also now, as I work as a death doula, and I see many people that are in turbulent times and are clinging to something for some hope or some faith or something to make sense of it all. And that's what they both did. And gratefully, they both did it with the same religion.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah,
that would have been awkward otherwise. So when they
I have amazing news for you. Yeah, right.
I am now Jewish.
Yeah, exactly.
But gratefully, when they came together, they were on a same idea and trajectory and easily decided that we would be missionaries and go spread Jesus everywhere.
Yeah. In your book, you have a line in there. You say, desperation is often a fertile soil for faith. And it seemed like that was kind of the position that your family was in for some time. Do you remember as a kid, like feeling any of that at all, or just being like, hey, like you're just a kid, like you didn't really understand what's happening?
Yeah, just a kid.
Yeah.
I couldn't have context for what it was that they were doing and how much they had to do.
Yeah.
You know, only now do I understand how expensive orange juice is. I mean, a half gallon is $9 or something like that. There were 4 of us to feed on missionary salaries and nonprofit director salaries.
I was going to say he went from like government work to church work, which neither one has a reputation for how well it pays.
We weren't rolling in it by any means. And like what they had to do in order to survive is beyond me. Yeah. And I will never really understand the details, you know?
Because when you came to the States, where did you settle?
We landed in Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland, where my youngest sister was born.
Okay.
Then we moved out to California, where my dad did seminary school at Fuller Theological Seminary.
Okay.
And then I think we left California. We left the States altogether. We moved to Nairobi for a while. Okay. And then while we were in Nairobi, we bounced around to places. And then we moved back to Ghana for a 2-year stint. And then we moved back to the States when I was 11.
Okay, gotcha. But the whole time they kept doing the ministry work.
All Jesus, all the time.
And still do?
Yeah.
To this day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And in large part, you know, my mom holds Bible study with her friends. And my dad has end-stage kidney disease, but he's still out there on the Facebook.
Yeah, there you go.
Facebook preaching.
Yep.
Absolutely.
What you and your sisters, none of you were religious?
I think we have varying degrees of engagement with religion and spirituality. Yeah.
Just didn't end up on the same page.
No, I mean, I'm ordained, but I marry people.
I see.
Yeah. And also I perform rituals and rites at the end of life. But, you know, I think it's pretty surprising that out of all of us, I'm the one who's a reverend.
Yeah. Have you studied like a bunch of different religions by nature of working as a death doula?
Mostly by nature of my curiosity.
Okay.
And when somebody practices a particular religion, I want to learn more about it. Yeah. It's probably going to be showing up in how they approach the end of their life.
Got it.
If we have people coming in, if there are rituals that they want performed, I want to understand. But never, ever do I perform the ritual of a religion I don't know or I'm not familiar with, unless there's somebody who also practices it there who's showing the way.
Do you often see people, I guess, convert is kind of the wrong word that I'm looking for. It's more like, do you see people change their belief on a dime at the end of their life? Do you see people cling to what they always believed? What do you see more of, or is it really just a circumstantial thing?
It's pretty circumstantial. However, I'll say that even the most religious amongst us begin to question our deeply held beliefs close to the end of life, because beliefs are beliefs, right? They're ideas without any real evidence for them. And when we are dying, knowing that we're going to find out what happens after we die, when we die, I can understand why you might want to be like, ooh, is this right?
Yeah. Right.
Or maybe I should have gone to church more.
Right.
Or maybe I should have gone to church less.
Right.
Or repenting. I've seen people get baptized at the 11th hour. I've seen people throw away a lifetime of Catholicism because they're close to the end and come up with their own ideas.
Wow.
I've seen people shift their beliefs based on what they've seen in the dream state as they approach death and dying.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, very, isn't it?
Yeah. What can you expound on that a little bit more? The dream state before death and dying.
There's a woman I know a woman I got to serve, who was a devout Catholic.
Okay.
And in her times of unconsciousness prior to her dying, which as people get closer to the end of life, they end up sleeping a lot more. She would wake up from her dreams sometimes and talk about an eye that she saw in her dreams. Now, I thought perhaps she meant the capital I, the eye that exists within us all that might be universal, but she meant a physical eye. She saw an eye in the sky every time she'd go to sleep. And so she started to wonder if she was going to be reunited with that eye in some way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are they like these types of, when you're dreaming in that state, approaching death, is there any evidence around like how lucid those dreams are, or how, compared to what they would have been not approaching death?
I haven't seen anything like that specifically, but I can imagine that they're pretty juicy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to be said about people that see people that have died already as they are approaching death, not while they're unconscious, but I've certainly had people come out of dreams and start reaching for people that aren't there while they're just right on the verge of waking. So.
Well, I definitely want to get back into that, but I want to jump back into the story here. So you are 11, moved back to the States. Any inkling of what you're wanting to do at this point with your life?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
Other than maybe be normal.
Okay.
Try really hard to be normal.
But what does that mean? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Especially for someone who is uprooted from a different continent, brought over here, went back over there, now back over here. Very like not religious, and then all of a sudden religious, and then in government and not in government, and like, what does that even mean?
Try to fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try not to stand out so much.
Yeah.
But I learned pretty early that wasn't going to be possible.
Yeah. Right.
At all. We were in Colorado Springs, Colorado, for starters.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. Right. Right. It was highly conservative, highly military.
Yep.
Very, very terribly white.
Yep.
There was my family.
Yep.
A few other Ghanaian families that were nearby. I saw a few Latinos, and that was practically it.
Yep.
And aside from that,
why did you end up there?
It's a center of the evangelical movement in the States. Focus on the family.
I do remember that. I do. So I grew up fundamentalist Baptist.
Okay.
About an hour and a half north of here. There's a big church there that I spent my entire childhood, like kindergarten all the way through senior year of college. I went to the church school, the school that was on the church campus, K through 12, and then they have a ministerial college that I also went to and graduated.
Really?
So that's kind of the context that I'm asking some of these questions in, that I'm curious about. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted you to continue along that.
Sure, direction. As long as I can ask you some questions about it.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
yeah, go for it. Whenever it comes up.
Are you still in the faith?
I'm not. No.
Okay.
I'm not religious anymore.
Okay.
No.
Did your time in the college help that?
Help move me away from it?
Yes.
No. It was really more when I was when it came down to the actual practical application that I was going to be working in ministry. It was I always had a knack for business and entrepreneurship and stuff like that, and I was doing sales in college just to make extra money. You know, I was engaged when I was 20 and then married at 21 to my high school sweetheart, who was still my wife, and she and I were wanted to be in ministry together and whatever. So when we started interviewing for jobs after that, I was saving up money and stuff from doing the sales job, but I was interviewing for ministry jobs. But when I was doing the sales job, I was also interning at a church and on the weekends. And I was finding myself like looking forward to getting back to school Monday so that I could do my sales job rather than interning at the church. And it was starting to confuse me. So I was just like, I'm supposed to be doing this thing for the rest of my life. I'm supposed to be quitting this in like 6 months when I graduate from college. But this is actually what I really want to be doing. I really don't want to be doing this. And of course, at the time, I was just like, oh, you're being tempted by Satan and he's trying to get you away from the Lord or whatever. And so it was the decision to like not go into ministry, and then the overwhelming lack of support that happened after that decision started like slowly moving me away from it. It was just kind of like nobody cares about like how I genuinely feel about this. Like nobody wants to even just listen to the conversation. It's just met immediately with just like, nope, you're doing the wrong thing. You should be doing this thing. And it's like, yeah, but you haven't even asked me a question about when I started feeling this way or why I feel this way or what's making me feel like that. Just immediately met with like, you're doing the wrong thing. You need to be doing the right thing. And just like something about that felt incongruent. And so I took a random ministry job somewhere else so I could tell the college that I was placed in ministry when I left. And then I was still full-time doing like sales and stuff like that. And then all it took was me moving away from where I grew up for the first time.
Yeah,
so I grew up here and moved to Fresno, which is Central Cal, with my wife like 6 months after we got married. And then within 6 weeks of being there, I knew that I didn't want to like be in ministry at all anymore. And then, just slowly started having more questions. Like it just started being way more questions than I had answers. You know, I started like looking for answers to the questions that I had, and then it just led to more questions. And then it just kind of slowly,
unraveled,
urged from there. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I say this in the kindest way is this seems like your ministry now.
Yeah,
Still kind of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. Isn't that fascinating?
It is interesting.
How we end up in it somehow anyway.
Right.
They look a little bit different.
People. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it looks a little bit different.
Yeah, you don't have to be a youth pastor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what I was going to be. I was going to be a youth pastor.
I could see it, but this is working.
Yeah, I think so. You know what I mean? It's been like 7 years, so it'd be weird if it weren't working. I kept doing it.
You're doing okay.
Okay, so you are. So what did you want to do at this point? Yeah,
just be normal, just to fit in somehow, just to acclimate to these strange new circumstances I found myself in. Mm-hmm. Not that I didn't get along with the other kids.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The whole reason I brought that entire thing up.
Yes.
Colorado Springs, Colorado. All I remember is hearing that at the end of these like CDs and tapes that I had in the car growing up because folks on the family, they had these like, Chuck Schwab stories or whatever. And at the very end of all of them, they'd be like, just send in your whatever to Colorado Springs, Colorado. And like, that was the only thing that I knew existed about Colorado Springs. Was that like, that was like the hub of where that was. So
a lot of Christianity.
Hilarious that's the epicenter that you guys decided to move to.
Isn't it fascinating?
So interesting.
So weird. These little African kids running around Colorado Springs, Colorado. And me in particular, I wasn't so into what the other kids were doing.
Okay.
I desperately wanted to, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be cool, but I wasn't.
Don't we all?
And I'm not. And that's okay now at 46, but at 12, it was just devastating. Absolutely devastating. I had these groups of friends that would often, go do things with themselves, and I'd only learn about it when we got back to school on Monday or Tuesday. And I was like, dang, I'm just not very cool, am I?
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything I could do. I mean, I like to sew my own clothes and talk about the stars and aliens, and that does not make you cool
at 12 or 13. Colorado.
Nowhere, I don't think, at 12 or 13.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that wasn't.
But you were also extremely athletic.
Yeah.
A lot of sports and stuff like that, right?
Played sports, cheerleaded.
Yeah.
I was in choir, so I did a lot of music. I wanted to be a conductor growing up. Once I started to think about what kind of career path I would take, I wanted to go into music in particular.
Okay.
And I got into Oberlin Conservatory.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I thought that this was going to be it. But I also got into Wesleyan University, and they're both liberal arts schools, but one is focused on music, which is the path that I would have taken. My dad said, hey, listen, if you go to Oberlin, you will just be doing music. But if you go to Wesleyan, you can do music and let's see what else opens up for you. So I went that path instead to see what else would open up. And in fact, the world did.
And something else did open up.
Justice work, big time. How the systems that hold this nation together are actually tearing people apart. And just, can I curse?
Sure.
Shitting on humans.
Yeah.
Just not taking care of the people that it's intended to. And that broke my heart in a way that I now finally had something to be able to do about. My heart had been broken very many times prior to that, but I was just sad about, how people treated folks with AIDS and recycling. I was very upset about the environment. I started a recycling program in my neighborhood when I was like 14 years old, going door to door, trying to collect cans from people.
Yeah.
And can you imagine?
I can. Yes.
On my little skateboard, and they were like, get out of here. But I did my best. But then finally in college, I could, I had a skill set. I had like words, I had language. I started getting in front of people. I could do something about it.
I say I can imagine because I did 5 or 6 years of door-to-door sales right out of college. So I did a lot of going door-to-door. And we did door-to-door at the church, inviting people to church since I was like 6.
Yeah. So you're familiar.
I'm familiar with I'm familiar.
Very familiar. That's my other ministry, recycling ministry.
Yeah, there you go. It
didn't work. It didn't last.
When did you start kind of having questions about the religious structure that you were raised in?
When people started speaking in tongues and I couldn't understand them.
So was this when you were a kid?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
yeah. Probably about like 8 or 9 or so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were having these types of like doubts or conversations like long before adulthood or in college.
I think all the way through.
Okay.
I remember asking some tough questions when I was younger, like, well, if Adam and Eve were married, then they only had those kids. Where the other ones come from? Everybody else that populated the earth. Like,
right. Also,
once I started to learn about
how
sex,
did the ethnicities like diverge in 6,000 years?
How did any of them? Like the Tower of Babel, okay, cool, but like
that explains language.
It explains language. Yeah. There was just so many questions that I never got. Also, this is the one that I think got my parents' goat more than anything. It's like, but if Jesus was Jewish, right, and Jesus did the things, the way that he was in the world was something that we really honor, then why are we just not Jewish? Like, why do we make a brand new one? They were like, well, we're Christian. And
Jesus
I was like,
did the new one. Yeah.
And you were Jewish.
Right.
And I mean, they're kind of cool. You know what I mean? So we could carry on some of those traditions if that's what we're really trying to do. So I asked a lot of questions, and most of them didn't have answers, at least not satisfactory ones for me, who keeps asking questions just by nature. I'm very, very curious. Nothing satisfied it. And that made me start to think that perhaps this wasn't going to be for me. I'd sit in the front row and say, well, I read the same words and this is what I got out of it, but I'm supposed to believe what you got out of it. But
interesting.
How do we then converse about what's in between?
Yeah, it's so funny how different people react to different. Like I was fully bought in until like early 20s.
Yeah.
I would have doubts or questions, but I would just label them. Again, I would label them as like sin.
Satan.
Satan's just trying to tempt me away from my thing. So I just got to forget about that question, forget about that doubt, forget about all that stuff. Just believe it.
Yeah.
And if I don't really believe it, then I wasn't really saved to begin with. And now I'm going to hell. Now I got to go like get saved again, There
was so much shame and not being good enough or worthy enough. Yeah. When my greatest fears was of the rapture occurring and me being left behind. Like as a teenager, I was afraid of the rapture mostly. And also of never marrying Tevin Campbell. I wanted that to come true so bad, but I also really didn't want the rapture to happen to me, be left behind.
Right.
About 15, 16, I argued with my parents so much about it that I stopped going to church.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I started babysitting the kids instead. So I didn't have to sit in the main service. And that
Were
was
you
a compromise.
Exclusive on this with your sisters?
For a while. And then a couple of them also came along. Yeah, but I was very, very certain about that. I wasn't going to do it anymore. It just I couldn't understand, and also the body. I struggled about the body. I couldn't understand why something that felt so good to me, what happens with my body sexually was so forbidden. I thought, well, if God made this body, he knows that it feels good. Why would he want me not to do it?
Right.
It just, so many of the things just didn't make sense to me.
How did your parents take that at that age?
They didn't like it.
Yeah.
At all. But we reached a compromise, for which I'm very, very grateful. They didn't just force me to keep doing that.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In retrospect.
Good on them. That's wild.
They gave me so much latitude. Yeah. I mean, one time I wanted to paint my bedroom. I painted it one color yellow. I didn't like it. So they took me back to the Home Depot to get a different color yellow. Didn't like that one either. They went back for the third time to get another color yellow. I would have been like, girl.
Figure out your own trip to Home Depot.
You are going to live in this highlighter bedroom. You made your bed. Buying it, but we kept going back. They gave me a lot of latitude.
Yeah. Do you think that that's the way to deal with teenagers who are doing things that are against what you want them to do?
I think that we're meant to steward kids. I don't think that we're meant to
own them.
Right. Like, it's so cool that young ones come through us.
Yeah.
Well, some of you. And that we get to just fan their little flames and, highlight the things that seem to light them up. And I think keep pushing them in that direction or giving them enough space to figure it out for themselves and just being like a little bouncy house around them.
That's the difficult thing, I think, that I've experienced so far. And my kids are obviously still super young, but it's like when you have a kid, it's not even, I don't know if it's just a projection of ego that you want them to be like you as much as it's just like you love them so much and you want them to love the things that you love and be interested in the things that you're interested in. You know what I mean? Like you just want to hang out with them and do the things that you like to do. And I think that if you're not careful, you can get to that point where you just push them to do it, like push them to be a carbon copy of you and prevent them from being the fullest version of who they are. And even if that fullest version of who they are might take them away from you.
Yeah.
Like that's the shitty part.
Yeah.
That's the realization.
Well, on one hand, they're going anyway.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's something that I've been paying attention to within myself. I don't have children myself. I have a niece and a nephew. My niece and I are extremely close. She was born on my birthday, 31 years later. And we're really, really tight. And the constant like letting go to allow her to become who she wants to become, what she wants to feel, what she wants to believe, what she likes to do, having me not be the center of her world is devastating. I think that there's a lot of grief involved in parenting and parenthood. I don't know how you all do it. My heart breaks for you. It really does. I know there's a lot of joy too.
Of course.
But the grief, like her little hands used to be pudgy and they'd have these little dimples and all of the little knuckles. They are all gone. I have a hard time not weeping when I see her hands now. She's 15. Yeah, the dimples have been gone for a long time. That's grief. You know?
Right.
Tough stuff.
It's a part like I forget where I heard this, but it was like, it was on Modern Family, which is one of my favorite sitcoms. He gives this whole kind of like monologue about the main, the grandpa in the show gives this whole monologue about like the different versions of kids that come along the way. And it like, I've luckily watched all that before I had kids. And so like I was trying to cherish each version of them, but that's what he was kind of saying is like every version, like every time your kid grows up more, it's like that version of them's gone completely.
Yeah.
Like that, pre-talking stage is like a version of them that will never be again. Like this toddler stage, this version will never be gone again. But they're still all in that person, which is really cool. It's like I think that's what magnifies your love for them. You know what I mean? It's like you love each and every time they've shed the previous version, you love the new version still, and you love the old version still,
Yeah, it does sound like amplification. And to me, it sounds like terror.
Yeah, exactly. And then one day, all versions of them walk out of your house and just go into the world without your protection anymore,
And they're just going to do whatever all the time. Like, okay, I hope you make good choices.
Yeah, exactly.
But
just think back to like your travels, the things that you did and stuff like that.
Oh my God. Bless my parents. I went to Thailand in the year 2000 into Chiang Mai. Thailand was not a hot tourist destination at that point, okay? During the time I was in Thailand, I saw probably about 4, 5, or 6 other visitors. So it was like really far off. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Spent some time in Chiang Rai, even further north. There was no cell phones. There were no like internet booths, I don't think.
Yeah.
I would be able to call my mom using a calling card. And that was like once a 3 weeks or something I'd call. They both just had to have incredible trust.
Yeah.
And I've chosen some very interesting adventures in the past. And I just, thank you, Mom. And also sorry.
Oh, that's my bad.
My bad. I get it a little bit more now.
But also thank you for, because all those experiences have formed you into the person that you are today.
Yeah. They trust me, I think.
Which is huge. It's huge. And to trust your kid too, you kind of have to trust yourself, ironically, because like you just kind of trust that you did the best that you could have done.
Yeah.
And like, man, I hope that they remember these things,
Yes.
what I mean?
And certainly
Yeah.
I try very hard not to bring any shame to my family's name.
Right.
I make choices just so I don't embarrass them.
Well, I think that you're doing a pretty good job.
Thanks, Travis.
Okay. So, you go to Wesleyan.
Yes.
Which is also where your dad went. Right?
Yes. And my older sister.
And your older sister. Okay. What's the plan when you go?
Have a good time. Be away from my parents, see what I can see. Okay. It's a liberal arts school, so I can study as many things as I want to. I thought it was going to be music, but then I got there and I took classes like The Newest Minority, which was about the emergence of the gay and lesbian identity in the 50s and 60s. Fascinating to me. I'd never heard any of the theory, any of the literature that came out of that course. I took classes in philosophy. I quickly became a psychology, sociology major.
Okay.
And I took a whole lot of credits in philosophy as well.
Okay.
And so I just started to broaden my perspective, my scope about humans in the world and how we engage with the world and how we think about the world. And it formed, I think, a really juicy foundation for me to also start thinking about race and gender and sexuality and injustice. And I got to, just start to see that there were things that I could do with my life that would move me firmly in the direction of the things that I thought were important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long, okay, as I understand it, psychology major, you said,
Yeah.
but then you decide to go to law school.
Yeah.
Was that for the justice issues that you're talking about?
100%.
Okay. And then you fast forward the clock a few years, and this is what leads you to this trip down in Cuba where you meet this girl, Jessica, I believe her name was. And then that's kind of the origin story, essentially, to how you got to doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Talk me through the stage between those things, like between the trip to Cuba and I don't know what's going on. I feel depressed and I'm just on autopilot and I would regret everything if I died right now. From that point, from going back to, I think I'm going to go to law school.
Yeah.
What happened in between there? How long was that period?
Part of the decision to go to law school was that justice. I wanted to do something about the things that broke my heart in the world. And my dad said, well, you could be a doctor, a lawyer, a politician, here are the ways. Well, first of all, here are all the things that you can do as an African child. So go and do all these things to make us proud. But also, if you want to affect change, here are the ways that change is affected. And I do not have the diplomacy to be a politician. The way that Kamala Harris held her face during that debate, I can't do. I can't do it. I can't do it. I thought I didn't have enough patience to be a teacher, but now I teach students at Going with Grace. I teach death doulas. So the law seemed to be the most appropriate one. What I found within the law after graduating, I took a job at the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, is that the law creates a lot of structures for society. And yet those structures, as I was saying before, those structures they benefit few. They don't benefit all. Certainly in the way that our benefits programs are doled out, the ways in which we are meant to care for the members of society that don't have a voice, they're not very well cared for. And there didn't seem to be much I could do about it in the law. What I would do is clients would come in time after time. They would have lost access to their benefits. They'd be back because their partner had abused them again and they were trying to flee with their kids and they needed restraining orders. There were nonprofit organizations that were trying to get started in low-income neighborhoods that couldn't get the funding for it, or conditions were so terrible where they were trying to work that they got chased out, or just a myriad of issues, a lot of ways that we could never quite give folks a bit of a leg up to get anywhere closer to where the rest of folks in society had it. It broke me. It really did. I kept butting up against what felt like a brick wall of oppression, and there was nothing to do about it. The work also just was a very good fit for who I am as a person. I mean, aside from this that I just said, I didn't want to be filling out forms all day.
I was going to say, you seem like you crave spontaneity and excitement and, I guess, color.
Yes.
To a world that, in the legal system is like black, totally black and white.
Very black and white. Yeah. Although we argue the gray, but very black and white.
Sure.
It was crushing.
Yeah.
It was crushing. And I was bored to tears.
And how long were you doing that?
Almost 10 years.
Wow.
But I jumped around from practice area to practice area, giving myself something new to learn every time. And it would keep me interested for a little bit of time until I realized I was still doing the same old stuff that I didn't want to do. I worked with really incredible people doing a lot of great work. And I think strides are being made. It just wasn't a good fit for me at all. It all culminated. I went to got a lateral move to the self-help center, the Inglewood Courthouse, where I worked in a basement. And it was great work also, working as a lawyer who would help self-help clients, folks that didn't have a lawyer who wanted to get their documents done. So we would serve a large number of people, but it meant that my client interaction was very slim. I had very strict hours and there was no windows. And I wilted like a flower.
Yeah.
The depression that had already been, as you do, just slowly dying.
Yeah.
There was already depression that had been brewing, but I'd been distracting by traveling or new boyfriends or, some outrageous, who knows what I was doing, cut my hair, dye it, get a new tattoo. I don't know, just try to keep myself excited somehow.
Yeah.
And I couldn't hide from it anymore. And it became a full-blown major depressive episode where I had reached a point I couldn't much care for myself. I was not bathing often enough. Sorry, Mom. I was showering because I didn't want to stink, but the energy it took to bathe and like the desire to do so was so slim.
Right.
I wasn't making any food for myself. I would eat just a handful of things every now and again when I noticed that I should be eating.
Which also makes everything worse. Like
everything worse.
Improper nutrition, improper hydration, no sunlight.
Very little sleep, a lot of insomnia. I was drinking a lot. I was smoking spliffs all night long. I stare into space and cry. It was not pretty.
Yeah, doing everything that you think you're supposed to do.
Doing all the things that I thought that I was supposed to do.
And from that outsider perspective would be like, you're successful, you're making a difference, you're impacting lives.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you happy?
I wasn't happy. I was miserable. But that also brought an additional layer of sadness and despair, which is that from all the expectations, this is it. Like I'm getting there, you know? Yeah. But it didn't feel like it to me. In fact, I felt like a complete failure. I wasn't not just happy, like I have no contentedness. I had no direction. There was no North Star. That broken heart that used to drive me was numb. Everything was numb. And I think I'd understood for a long time. I thought depression was just sadness, but to me it was like the absence, just I couldn't find myself. I couldn't pinch myself to feel sad or to feel the pain. I just couldn't feel much of anything.
Do you just book a one-way ticket? How do you get out of that?
I went to, I traveled a bunch and I went to my friend's house in Colorado, Kristen. And she nourished me back to health, to some version of health. And I met...
Just quit your job or took a leave of absence?
Leave of absence. Okay. Medical leave of absence.
Okay.
Medical leave of absence. Was the only lawyer I know who was like, y'all, I can't make it. Mental health medical leave of absence. Okay. I don't have surgery. I just can't make it.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore. It was serendipity that I ended up in Cuba. I met a person who worked for Greenpeace after I'd spent the morning meditating and thinking about Alan Gonzalez, who's Cuban. And this Greenpeace worker that I met later had this bag that said Cuba te espera on it. And so I bought a round trip ticket to Cuba.
Got it.
Yes.
And then that's where you meet Jessica.
Yes.
So you guys basically are just partying, having a good time. And then the whole time you don't realize that she has uterine cancer?
She has uterine cancer. Yeah. Well, I learned that very quickly on the bus that we're together. I'd been partying with somebody else all night long. And then a car almost hit me on the way to go meet the bus in the morning to leave. And when I got to the bus stop, I met Jessica. We started chatting. Turns out Jessica was in that car that had almost hit me. But I didn't know that until 14 hours later when we'd been on the bus ride.
Why do you think you so fully engaged in the conversation around death when so many would just be like, I'm so sorry, and then avoid it awkwardly?
I think by virtue of depression.
Yeah.
Everything was numb mostly. Also a bit of tact. I lacked some tact sometimes. I don't know if it's the right thing to say or not.
Yeah.
And also just surprise.
Yeah.
It was the first time somebody had so plainly and bluntly talked about a serious illness with me. And I was like, what? Yeah. I mean, otherwise maybe I should have said,
and somebody young, vibrant,
traveling like me,
fun. Yeah.
And so I just started asking her questions, pelting her like I do in the way that sometimes my boyfriend says I'm cross-examining him.
You can't take the lawyer out completely.
I can't do it.
I mean?
But I'm just focused. I'm trying to get in it. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, right.
Just ask question after question after question. And she answered and more questions and more questions. And she kept answering.
It's even cooler that she kept answering.
So cool. We talk about that sometimes. And I'm like, why? Like, why did you answer my questions? And she said it was one of the first times somebody had asked her.
Yeah.
And these were questions that she'd been sitting on herself. And so we got to engage in a dialogue about it. Often when she'd talk about illness, people would have her focus on healing and hope instead, you know? But to me, death is not the absence of health. Like, they're not opposites of each other.
Yeah.
It's a part of the greater conversation. Like, how you approach your dying is also a question of health. Maybe not physical health, but certainly emotional, spiritual, relational.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of health involved in death as well.
We keep bringing up serendipity. It's funny because I think this interview's been we've been trying to get it on the calendar for months now. And I'll share this with you just because of the context of this conversation. I try not to bring it up on the podcast a ton because I just don't want to beat a dead horse with it. But I was diagnosed with cancer a few months ago and there's 2-3 month period tests and all that stuff, and had surgery and got it, removed. And now I'm on the other side already. I'm in remission. Everything's gone to my knowledge. And so now sitting down and have this conversation and then reading through your book, and then obviously how many examples of people that you've been with who are dying and how many of them were related to cancer, it just brought up a ton of unresolved things in my mind about like going through all of that. And so like thinking through your death and being faced with your mortality, while being blindsided by that information is all very, very top of mind for me. And in your book, you said, or actually, I don't know if this was a book. I think it was just an interview I was listening to, where the host asked you if you would be, if a death diagnosis would be scary to you. And you said, no, it's not scary. It's not comforting either. It just is. Can you expound on that for a second?
Yes. First, thank you for sharing that with me. That is some incredible serendipity that we would have talked prior to your diagnosis overall. Now you have a lot of juicy information to draw from. I think that diagnoses, well, let me back up. We don't have much control in this life. And what we can control is how we respond when we're dealt the cards that we're dealt. That's what I mean by just is. I will certainly have feelings about it. I think there'd be a lot of grief. There'd probably be some confusion. I probably would be uncertain about how to handle medicine, or if I wanted to, or how to engage with it. I'm sure some of these things came up for you. And at the same time, it would just be where I was at. And so I must arrive there. I see a lot of suffering that's created in folks by resistance to their current circumstances. I think that's where a lot of suffering in the world comes from anyway. I wish something were different, or at least internal suffering, aside from the suffering that we inflict on each other, BT dubs. But often me being in resistance to what actually is in front of me, where I am, what I want, what my body's doing. And that's what I mean by just is, that we would just be there and then have to figure out how we're going to engage with it moving forward. I think it wouldn't be great. But I also would like to think that I've lived in such a way now that if I were getting close, I'd be like, oh, girl, you did it.
Right.
Yeah.
You said something about how negative sometimes hope can be in those situations. And I think that kind of correlates to what you were just talking about. It's almost this desperation for optimism that keeps people from confronting a very real potential path that could happen, and then prevents them maybe from going the way that they would have liked to go because they can't fathom that it's coming, and so they just keep delaying the conversation, or they, like I said, they have this willful, almost poisonous optimism that's preventing them from dealing with the way that they should probably be dealing with it.
Yeah. Hope can be dangerous at the end of life. I think when folks are in treatment and there is a great potential that they could heal, in that case, I think hope is powerful, that it can encourage people to, try another treatment or
maybe life-giving.
Try this Ayurvedic remedy, whatever it is that they need in order to keep going. Yet when we reach the point where it looks like the medicine isn't working anymore, and perhaps the body is losing its capacity to keep doing what it's been doing, meaning that the body is just starting to wind itself down, getting closer to death, hoping that it won't is dangerous because it does not allow people to be with the reality of what's happening. It doesn't give time to plan. It takes away surrender. It doesn't open up the portal where grace can come through.
And it might prevent you from mending relationships or having the conversation that you've been avoiding, or any number of things.
A lot of things. It also sometimes pushes people into continuing to get treatments that aren't benefiting them, that ultimately diminishes their quality of life significantly. with the focus on quantity, as opposed to perhaps giving them time to say, okay, I'm going to get off of this treatment because this isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Maybe I can swallow again, and maybe I can enjoy that chocolate cake that I like again.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. What are some of the things that you've seen as it relates to how you live your life and the sheer volume of experiences with death that you've had?
I eat a lot more chocolate cake.
That's a good thing.
It is a good thing.
That was funny when I got my diagnosis. That was kind of like I pride myself on being healthy and staying in the gym and eating right and all these other things, you know. And then I got diagnosed, and then I was like, I think I'm gonna go have a cigar, and sip some whiskey.
Nice.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, what? Why?
Right.
What's the reason?
Cherish it? Did you savor it?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It tastes different. You know?
I'm sure.
It tastes different.
You know, another thing I wanted to say before we move to the question that you asked me is that so often I think that people get really focused on what they did wrong along the way. You know, so you receive a diagnosis that comes out of nowhere because I did all the right things.
Yep.
And then also becomes a game of self-blame, which is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can allow death to just be, if we can allow disease to just be, not because you did something wrong or you ate the wrong thing or whatever those things
are. Or
are.
God's trying to get your attention.
Or God's trying to get your attention. You know, if we can just let it to be, the body is doing some things.
Yep.
And I did not predict these things, nor can I control these things.
Yep.
So let me just address these things as they are. Your question was about the things that I've learned. So many of them. But the chocolate cake is a metaphor for allowing myself to desire what I desire and be who I am for the time that I'm here, savor what I want to savor. This is my life. You know, this one is mine. I get to live it the way that feels best to me, because at the end, I am going to be the only one who has to reconcile with all the choices I've made.
Yes.
All of them. And so if I don't, I've noticed that people who don't typically get closer to the end of life with a lot of regret and wishing that they would have said or done something else. Now that causes a lot of fear. It causes people to cling. It causes people to take treatments that they might not need or the body isn't going to take anymore because they want another chance to do something that they didn't do with the time that they had while they were here.
Yeah. You studied a lot of philosophy in college. With all the different belief systems, philosophies, religions, there's a few that stand out to me. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on it. I know one of the major tenets of one of the philosophies that I've studied probably more than some of the other ones is Stoicism. And one of the major tenets of that is to contemplate your own death frequently. I think Buddhism would be one of those as well. How have you seen those like belief systems or value systems relate to the work that you do with those people?
Well, I think it's healthy practice for anybody at any point in the life cycle, particularly when we're healthy and we're not yet thinking about our death.
Yeah.
And when I say healthy, I mean we don't yet know what it is that we're going to be dying of. So I would apply this to you too. Is that when we begin to contemplate our mortality consistently, it allows us to see our lives through a very, very singular and clear focus.
Yeah.
That value is tremendous. I see folks who are trying to do it when it's too late.
Yeah.
Or they're at the very end. If we can be in practice consistently now, then perhaps when the time comes, I mean, who knows? I may still go kicking and screaming. Okay. But I like to think that I'd be like, okay. And also, I think it would be kind of relieving to have an end to the mystery about how and when I'm going to die. You know, it sits with us our whole lives.
That's fair.
And then let's say one day, stage 4 something, we're getting really close. It's past the point of treatment. I'm like, oh, this is how it ends.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's make it pretty.
Yeah. Got a period on the end of that sentence.
Yes. I also want to say that it's really important to use the privilege of being able to think about our mortality, because it's a very privileged position to be able to do so. You know,
yes,
many folks
to not have to think about how you're going to eat today,
or a bomb being dropped on you, or what happened to my mom. You know, she went out yesterday and she never came back, and we have to get safe.
Yeah.
And so it is an incredible privilege to think about it. And when we do use that privilege, it can create a lot of value for our lives. I think like people with privilege we should use them in the direction of good.
Yeah. Death is one of those things. It's hard to get people to talk about it or think about it. And I think there's almost this hesitation to talking about it. Like if you start contemplating your own death or talking about death, that it's like saying Beetlejuice 3 times. Like, like the Grim Reaper is going to show up if you talk about death and take you next, and it's just like that. It just feels depressing. It feels bad. There's so many like negative emotions that are associated with it. It just puts people away from ever contemplating what that might feel like. But then it also makes them not ready to do it. And then it also never gives them that really great perspective of like, one day this is all going to be over. Why am I doing this soul-sucking corporate job still? This doesn't make any sense. Like it doesn't give them that fresh perspective. They're so afraid of it. Have you found a particular path to helping people work through and like being willing to face that, that to be able to say death without fearing the Grim Reaper?
Yes. I actually think that people want to talk about death more than we think that they do. I think that we think of it as a big taboo. But when I tell people what I do, 9 times out of 10, they lean in, they have questions, they have thoughts, they have ideas. They say, why aren't we talking about this? This is what I think. This is what I want. It allows people, my work gives people permission to be able to finally say the things that are on their hearts and on their minds. I think we're all thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think we think about it in different ways, perhaps. Like, it may not be clear that what is on my mind is a fear of death when I say, I need to write this book. It's me living in relationship to my mortality. I must get this done. Otherwise, if I wasn't going to die, I don't need to write this book. I'll just do it whenever, Yeah. Is that making sense? Yeah. And so we are thinking about it sometimes subconsciously, and people, I think, do want to talk about it. We just need to open the door.
Yeah.
We're doing it right now. And hopefully everybody who's going to listen is now also opening the door for themselves.
Yeah.
And the door is cracked. Like people are starting to pay attention.
It's pretty wild how many things the things that every single human being thinks about the most are the things that none of us are ever allowed to talk about.
Weird.
Death, money, sex, like all
So
these
weird.
things that are like the core things that like consumes 80%, 90% of our thinking, on a daily, weekly basis is like, oh, can't talk about that. Can't bring that up. You shouldn't talk about that. That's uncouth or whatever.
Yeah.
So how are we supposed to work through these things?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, how are we supposed to come up with better solutions if we can't even talk about it or bring it up anymore?
About it. Yeah. And I think what I've noticed is that people really, really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But also opening up the door on death opens up the door to everything else.
Yeah.
It also opens up the door for us to talk about things like our bodies and insecurities and doubt and fear and sadness and pain and sorrow. These are all things that we hide. But being able to talk about death brings my whole life into focus. That means that all of who I am is also in focus, including my jiggly thighs. Or that I'm, having growing gray eyelashes, or all the things that people don't ever want to admit.
Yeah.
But it's
but we all definitely experience.
You are aging.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right? Jiggle, sag, gray, lose some hair.
Yeah. Eat some French fries.
Eat some fries. I mean, eat some kale too, if that's your thing.
Sure,
but eat some fries. Fine.
I wish I had more time with you. This has been a really, really fun conversation for me. Ironically, just with everything that's been going on, it's been top of mind and been looking forward to the conversation for a long time. So I appreciate you taking the time. For those watching, listening, please go pick up a copy of Alua's book. I promise you will not regret it. Like I said, the audiobook is fantastic as well. So go pick those up. Tell her you heard about her here on the show. Alua, is there anywhere else that you want to send people? Anything else that we can do for you?
No, you can find us on the internet. We have a lot of death-related coursework for people that want to become death doulas or folks that are interested in engaging with their mortality, or just communities to come and learn for a bit or sit with other people that are down to have the conversation.
Is that a personal website?
Goingwithgrace.com.
Goingwithgrace.com.
is a great one. Yeah. Great. And also on socials, going_with_grace. Otherwise, you'll end up at like a yellow lab in Kansas. That's not me.
Got it.
Okay.
So a yellow lab, that's not.
It's not.
Okay, got it.
No.
Goingwithgrace.com. Go check out everything that she has up over there. And as always, on the show, remember to leave every relationship better than you found it. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.